And here we go. It's another edition of the Arrowhead Pride Rapid Reaction Show. I'm the editor-in-chief of arrowheadpride.com, Pete Sweeney. And the Kansas City Chiefs end up losing on Sunday Night Football by a score of 36-35. I'd like to welcome in my co-host for this Rapid Reaction Show, Steve Serda. Steve, I'll let you have your comments in a second here. I'm just going to make the first general point of what I'm feeling, and that is the fact that Kansas City has this player in Patrick Mahomes, and I think there are times when we just take this idea of, and granted, we saw it in the Super Bowl, but in the regular season, he's just so damn good that it allows just so much room for error, where he usually plays quite perfectly, and you could have deficiencies, whether it be dropped passes, whether it be something where your offensive line isn't working, whether it be you're not getting penetration, whether it be your run defense is bad, your pass defense is bad, your pass rush is bad. There's no way to stop anybody, it seems like, in Baltimore. And Patrick Mahomes is just going to solve the problem. The thing that happened on Sunday Night Football is the problems surrounding Mahomes were just too much. And Mahomes himself had a bad interception. And the rest of the team, especially defensively, was just so poor that it didn't allow someone to have the one mistake. And I know that the Chiefs had the ball at the end, and it seemed like that they were able to go sneak out another one. But they weren't able to do so after the Clyde Edwards-Helaire fumble, which was bad in itself. And so it almost took it out of Mahomes' hands. But I mean, I look at it this way. When you're looking at a team that is a Super Bowl or bust team every single year, it's tough with this pit in your stomach after a loss like this to feel like there's a bright side. But I just think sometimes Mahomes bailing this team out every single time, like it's going to catch up to them. And this is probably going to be a big wake-up call for the defense. There's going to be a lot of bad film for this team to watch. And I just tend to think in the grand scheme of things that sometimes you lose and you could be better for it. But there is nothing that you could say about the defense other than maybe Tyrann Mathieu's return and the two early picks that went right. And I had not felt that the defense felt as bad or looked as bad dating back to what was the end of the Bob Sutton era. And that is not an era in Chiefsdom that you want to be. And again, just too much for Mahomes to overcome. He wasn't perfect. He was near perfect on Sunday night, but he would have had to have been otherworldly and how we usually see them to overcome just how poor the defense was.
Yeah, he threw his first interception in the month of September. This is his first loss in the month of September. And that just speaks to how otherworldly he's been as the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, you're just going to lose these football games sometimes. There's things to be concerned about. I'm not going to say that there isn't, because they didn't play a perfect football game. But Mahomes was special when he needed to be at times. And then Lamar was just also special tonight. Like Lamar Jackson, we have to keep in mind that Lamar Jackson's also a former MVP, very special player. It's just we always do this thing where we compare him to Patrick Mahomes. And this was a big thing for Lamar Jackson winning this football game. This is a big thing for the Ravens in general. And the Chiefs made mistakes that they don't generally make. And usually when they make those mistakes, they overcome them. They just didn't overcome the mistakes tonight.
I just look at the statistics. I mean, you just look at the statistics of this game. When you consider this defense, the entire talking point of the offseason was they need to be better in the red zone. Well, there have now been 8 trips to the red zone, and 8 times a touchdown has been scored, both by the Cleveland Browns and the Baltimore Ravens. And it's not to say that a big Baker Mayfield can't make plays. It's not to say that Lamar Jackson, who I consider better than Baker Mayfield on my personal quarterback rankings, can't make plays. I mean, we saw him make a Mahomes-type pass tonight with Hollywood Brown, again, with the poorest Chiefs defense, just being wide open down the field, where Lamar Jackson had to jump up and sort of toss it over the defense, and it wound up being what was a 42-yard touchdown pass. A couple comments on Lamar too. He had an interview right after the game on NBC and was more or less like, we knew we were going for it because we had that win and we were in control of it. And this was a team in the Ravens who had a target on the Chiefs' back. Guess what? This isn't changing. It doesn't matter just because you lost, you're not going to have that target. Everybody wants to beat the Chiefs because you see what it mattered to an organization in Baltimore tonight with everybody going absolutely crazy. And that's the case every time now. And this is what you've been waiting for as a Kansas City Chiefs organization, as a fan base. You've wanted to be this team for a long time. And a week 2 regular season game is going to seem like the Super Bowl to the Baltimore Ravens. Last year's early season game where you lost to the Las Vegas Raiders is going to feel this important to teams like that are trying to become you. You've now created this model where you're going to AFC championship games, you're winning AFC titles, you won the Super Bowl, you're the class of the AFC. And so this win matters. It's how are you going to respond? How are you going to stay on top of that hill? I think there's a lot of credit that is owed to defensive coordinator Wink Martindale. This guy loves blitzing, loves the cover zero. It's in his bones. Like, it would almost be the equivalent of Andy Reid saying, no, we're going to date it back to the 1950s and we're going to run 45 times tonight because that's the way to go. He went completely out of character because he knew he had to. He knew what he was doing against Patrick Mahomes simply wasn't working. There were minimal blitzes from the Baltimore Ravens. And as Chris Collinsworth was describing on the broadcast, they were coming up with new coverages where it seemed like the concept is there's 2 waves of coverage where maybe in a way it's delayed pressure for Patrick Mahomes, where maybe he gets a little comfortable, can feel like he steps up, then you bring the next wave of pressure. And it worked and curbed him enough. And so I think with all the Ravens did, there are plenty of problems to fix in Kansas City, but I think they deserved this win too. And they were badly beaten up. I mean, if you look at our predictions on arrowheadpride.com, nobody was giving them a chance, and they did enough to deserve the win, Steve.
Yeah, and this was a tough football game. It was a fun football game. It's not fun when the Chiefs lose. Obviously, you want to see the Chiefs win every single game, but like you said, Pete, this is the Ravens' Super Bowl. Like, I'm not trying to say that this rivalry between Mahomes and Lamar, and we even made light of it a little bit this week, how Lamar had never beaten Mahomes, and it's not really a rivalry if the other person doesn't ever beat that player. But it kind of goes back to the Brady Manning type of rivalry where these guys are going to play each other every year moving forward. And I hope we get these kinds of games every year because it was a fantastic football game to watch. As frustrated as you are that the Chiefs weren't able to pull it out, it was still really fun. And this is the Ravens Super Bowl. And last week it was the Browns Super Bowl. And next week it's probably going to be the Chargers Super Bowl after they had a bad loss today. So you're going to get this every single week from whoever you're playing because that's just how good you are now. And so you have to take a step back and realize that Patrick Mahomes is absolutely incredible, but he can't always pull it off. Like, sooner or later, something just doesn't break your way. And tonight it just didn't break their way. And kudos to the Ravens and Lamar Jackson and their coaching staff going forward on that 4th and 1 call. It was just an incredible football game, and somebody had to win. And unfortunately, it wasn't the Chiefs tonight.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. It's just, I mean, you got nothing from the defensive side. And I think that is what was so frustrating. I mean, you look at the statistics with the Ravens and they had 31 first downs. They were 6 of 11 from third down. I noted they went 4 of 4 in the red zone, the 481 to 405. They were picking on Chris Jones, it seemed like, early in the game, in the run game, running to his side wherever he was. They were trying to find him and run that way and truly see if he could set the edge. It seemed like that was a little bit of a liability. There was some problems with Nick Bolton in coverage. We mentioned the wide open pass to Hollywood Brown that was clearly some kind of miscommunication. And you ended up with your lone right side being Tyrann Mathieu. And he was injected to the lineup along with Frank Clark. Clark had the one play in the open field, but was really quiet otherwise. And then you also had Chris Jones, and I just find like Chris Jones is at a crossroads, right? There is an average player in the NFL. There are above average players like Chris Jones, and that is fantastic to have on your organization. And then there's elite players like an Aaron Donald. And if you want to be on that level, there's got to be a certain point where teams aren't scheming to run at you, or if you could find a way to make an impact late in the game, this is where the elite players go and make a change and win the game. And look, to Jones's credit, we saw it last week against the Cleveland Browns, but these guys that are in that class do it more weeks than they don't. And I thought we didn't see enough pressure on the opposing offense from the Chiefs front. Their only sack of the night actually came from Daniel Sorensen. It seemed like the coverage left some room to be desired. And I just think the entire defense just simply had no answer for Lamar at the times that it mattered. Now, his statistics weren't wild. He just was making the plays when he needed to. It was timely plays. And at the end of the game, it just ended up being too much. And the Chiefs, they created that. They created a margin of error that was so small by the end of the game that something like an errant fumble by Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's been pretty good at that, right? He doesn't fumble the football, puts the ball on the ground, and that's it, right? And so it is truly back to the drawing board for Steve Spagnuolo and company.
Yeah, and they weren't good last week. Like, we don't need to dance around it because this is coming after a loss, whereas last week they were able to pull off a win. They weren't particularly good last week. And there's a lot of talk of, the 2018 defense and how that held that team back from going to a Super Bowl, because it did. I don't think there's a chance this defense is that defense. There's just too much talent on that side of the ball for the Chiefs to be this bad. The Ravens are just a particularly bad matchup for what they're not good at. And it played right in the Ravens' hands tonight. They had an exceptional game plan. And I think they're a particularly bad matchup for Chris Jones, where he's never been a dominant run defender. The Ravens are particularly bad because they have so many run option type of things in their offense where they can utilize so many guys that way to kind of keep you moving laterally and keep you guessing. And that's just a bad matchup for Chris Jones. So, yeah, it's disappointing that you didn't see him at least show up at some point. Like, I would have loved a fourth quarter Chris Jones sack or seen some kind of life from him. But this was a bad matchup for them in general. And the run defense is a problem. I'm interested to see what this run defense really looks like when Willie Gay comes back. And we don't really have a timetable on that. He's going to be out at least through next week, and then we'll kind of see once the Chiefs give us an update on that. But Willie Gay is the type of playmaker we believe who has the athleticism. He could make some impact plays on the second level of that defense because they just don't have it right now. And their run defense is the worst run defense in football through 2 weeks.
It seems like they really, this is obvious, but they need to find a way to set the edge better. I know Frank Clark was just getting into the lineup. Chris Collinsworth had mentioned that he was rotating with Mike Dana to try to get that style. And you look at the linebacker core right now, Nick Bolton, we have to say this, has had moments where, in my opinion, he's flashed when he's looked good, when he's been around the line of scrimmage and he could find a way to successfully tackle. He's had a few moments where he's looked bad, particularly in coverage. Anthony Hitchens, even with the lost weight, he does look a little quicker, but you're right. At the second level, they don't have that speed. And you lost this game by 1 point, right? And you were expecting to have Willie Gay. And I think Willie Gay might have made the difference in this game with the speed and being able to chase down a Lamar Jackson when he's running for first downs. And this is tough. And this goes to like the analytical people who say you shouldn't draft a running back. I mean, the Ravens were down to their fourth string running back, and you had Tyson Williams and Latavius Murray, who essentially was on the street after being thrown away by the New Orleans Saints, and he was having successful runs. You had Devontae Freeman at a certain point. And so no matter who it was, it just seemed like there were holes to be had against the Chiefs defense. And this is going to be a tough week in the sense, and you're going to have to look in the mirror. We will have these press conferences after Steve and I get off. If you're listening to our podcast channel, I'm seeing in the tweets now, because we're doing this live after the game, that Tyrann Mathieu essentially says, as you can hear in a few minutes here, right here, that, sometimes you kind of got to get your ass whooped. And this is not going to be a fun week. It's not going to be a fun week to go over all the problems I think the Chiefs displayed. It's not going to be a fun week for Steve Spagnuolo to come to the podium on Thursday and have to figure out, what to say as to what they need to do better. Andy Reid in the press conference, it sounds like he was mentioning how poor the tackling was, and it was. So there's a lot to be shored up on the defensive side of the football. I don't know if there's a ton to really say on offense. I thought the offense looked all right. You can't put the ball on the ground if you're Clyde Edwards-Helaire. If you're going to be a running back on the team, I mean, that stands out. I thought it was good that Patrick Mahomes was spreading the football. If you want to look at the good parts of this game, we had wondered if there was going to be some supplemental production from other guys. You had passes caught by the regular guys, which is Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. Ravens, by the way, had a good plan for Hill. He only ended up with 14 yards. Also, Pringle, Hardman, Robinson, McKinnon, Fortson, and even Michael Burton were in the mix, all with receptions. So Mahomes really spreading the ball around. And in this loss, I just want to say something about the Travis Kelce touchdown play. Now, the loss is fresh, and I say this with caution, and just try to keep, try to think of your entire fandom in mind as I say this. 20 years from now, Steve, we're not going to really remember how this game ended. But I think this play by Travis Kelce is the greatest play of his career. It's a shame that it had to come in a loss. This is the epitome of who Kelce is. And you talk about like a Hall of Fame reel, and I think we would agree that he's going to be a Hall of Famer in a game that'll be very forgettable. I just think that similar to Patrick Mahomes and what he did against the Tennessee Titans in the AFC title game, or even in that regular season game against the Ravens with 4th and 9, this probably was Travis Kelce's best play of his career. I don't think you're going to have another play that you can dig up. He's had some great plays. Don't get me wrong. I don't think you could dig up one that was better than this, and I don't think he'll have a better one than this. Just bobbing and weaving his way through the defense, looking like a receiver at 260 pounds. And so I thought, if you're digging and you're really seeking out cool moments, I thought that was a lone, cool moment of the night that you can remember.
It was both the Pringle and Kelce touchdowns were both very similar plays where, they were thrown to like the opposite, like middle side of the field, and both of them just ran and just dodged tackles and shake tackles off. And Pringle just ran past everybody. But it was awesome to see, obviously, Kelce, that's just kind of what you expect from him, do crazy things that nobody else can do because you're a Hall of Fame player. But it was great to see Pringle do that. It was nice to see Demarcus Robinson get the touchdown pass early in the game. But I don't know what to do with Mecole Hardman anymore. It's pretty clear. I know we're only into 2 weeks of the season, but it's pretty clear that he's not going to be your consistent number 2 wide receiver outside of Tyreek Hill. And Byron Pringle at this point, I think, is a more polished wide receiver than Mecole Hardman really is. And so that's concerning. And Clyde, the running game, all of that stuff is concerning. But yeah, it was nice to see Byron Pringle get the play and make the touchdown and get some attention in the offense, because I'd like to see him get more looks, to be honest, because it seems like we keep having the same conversation every single week about Mecole Hardman, and I'd rather just see those looks go somewhere else at this point.
I don't think we need to even get into Byron Pringle again, because we've said the same thing so many times, and I'll say it one more time, right? Anytime he gets targets, he seems to produce. That's essentially the conversation we have with Byron Pringle. We've had it like 10 times now. Whereas I think Mecole Hardman, fans expect more from him because of how high he was drafted. The Chiefs traded up for him. If Mecole Hardman was like a 5th or 6th round receiver and you were getting this production like Demarcus Robinson, I don't know if you would feel as badly about it. But that to me is what you're getting out of him. It's the career of like a 4th or 5th round receiver that has managed to stick. And I think if you change the lens of how you're looking at McCole Hardman, maybe you start to feel better about it. But I think you're right. I think we need to throw out this idea that he's going to be some kind of largely impactful player in the Chiefs offense. You talk about the second receiver on this team. I think it's a second receiver by committee. I think it's going to be the hot hand. And I think it's time for Pringle to get more of an opportunity. I think he should be in that spot. He took off tonight. I think that stood out. I think now you've seen it in a regular season game where what was different about that play tonight is he did something that maybe other receivers can't do in the sense of where he was in that play and managing to really turn on the Jets and get in the end zone. And maybe this finally gets on the radar of the Chiefs and he gets more opportunities. Byron Pringle, 2 targets, 2 receptions for 63 yards in the touchdown. McCole Hardman had 3 more receptions, but 8 less yards in this game, only the 5 receptions on the 8 targets. So, I think it's time Pringle gets an opportunity. Why not? I don't think it's going to be happening for Hardman, and I think there's a case to be made that he is potentially a better option. And if that's the case, then let's see him a little bit more involved on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I mean that's all. That's really all I want. That's all the Chiefs need in that other wide receiver is consistency. And when Sammy Watkins was on the field, he could at least supply that for you because you knew Sammy Watkins would be where he's supposed to be, and you knew he could make a play every now and then. That's all they really need there. They don't need somebody who's gonna do it week in and week out. They just need it in clutch moments. And I think Byron Pringle at this point can supply that in a safer way than I feel like McCole Hardman can. I do want to get back to the defense really quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just, through 2 weeks now, I'm questioning the adjustments that they're making or whatever. And I know there's, how much can you really do in game or whatever, but they're struggling across the board right now. And obviously last week, Chris Jones came up with the sacks that were huge later in the game. But this week, that type of stuff didn't happen. And now we're continuing to have serious secondary questions where I know Dan Sorensen got the sack and he made a couple of plays late in the game. But early in that game, Dan was a liability for the Chiefs.
Right.
Juan Thornhill still isn't heavily involved in the rotation right now. And I'm just curious, I just want to know what it's going to take to get Juan Thornhill out there because we've talked about it a lot. He's shown flashes of the athleticism that you just don't get with Dan Sorensen. And I have to imagine if you just let him out there and let him work and get the reps, that whatever the question marks are, we can figure it out on the fly because it can't be worse than what we're getting right now.
Right. No, it's all good points. And I think there's a few people who, if you're naming people that in the defense who we're just not hearing about and they're just not making as much of an impact as maybe we expected. Jarran Reed. Jarran Reed is a player that Andy Reid really threw in front of us and said we should be talking more about Jarran Reed. I think Chris Jones, we had mentioned Jones from more of a, like I was saying before, I don't have to get back into that conversation, but taking that next step to an elite level. And look, I'm not putting that on him. He's put that on himself and how he's depicted himself in the media. And I love that. But I think if you're going to try to consider yourself this elite player who is going to be threatening for the sack record, which I am rooting for, this was my bold prediction. You just got to do more. You got to be more impactful on Sundays. Frank Clark has been invisible. I'm seeing on Twitter that he is speaking to the media tonight, so we will see what he says. And you're right about the safety play and the play in the secondary. I just think there's a lot to clean up. And I think what they do next week in a home game now, it's a division game against the Los Angeles Chargers, will tell you a lot about who the Kansas City Chiefs are and can they rebound and look a lot better because to me, it doesn't get any easier. I subscribe to the idea that Justin Herbert is a better quarterback than Lamar Jackson. I think these guys are both top 10 quarterbacks, but I just like Justin Herbert better. To me, he reminds me more of Patrick Mahomes than Lamar Jackson does. And to me, Patrick Mahomes is the perfect quarterback to have for your football team. So this defense is going to have to figure this out quick, or all of a sudden you might be facing some territory you've not been facing in a long time, and that's a loss to a division rival. And then all of a sudden you're behind in the AFC West. This has not been a place the Chiefs have been at in a while where their backs are, I know it's early, but their backs are really going to be up against the wall, and they gotta figure this out really fast.
Yeah. Justin Herbert, in my opinion, is the second best quarterback or second quarterback I would want in the NFL quarterbacking my franchise outside of Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
And he's an exceptional player, and we're going to see how that unfolds next week. And there's definitely reasons to be concerned about it after 2 games. I still don't think, and we're only 2 weeks into this thing, we still haven't seen a complete game from the Chiefs, even against the Browns. Like, the Browns were in total control early on in that game, and then it took a miraculous play from Patrick Mahomes to kind of turn the tide. Early on, Chiefs were looking good in this one, and then it all just kind of fell apart as Lamar just started gashing them for huge chunks of yardage. Like, there was serious miscommunications on defense tonight. The jump pass from Lamar to Hollywood Brown, which was a fantastic play by Lamar Jackson, but either Charvarius Ward was supposed to be manned up on Hollywood Brown, or somebody was supposed to supply him with some deep coverage over the top, and they did not do it because Hollywood Brown should not have been that wide open. There should not have been that miscommunication where Lamar Jackson walks into the end zone at the end of the football game when you know what Lamar can do with the ball in his hands. Like, it should not be that easy. And you know that they like to use him that way around the goal line. There's just a lot of miscommunications and sloppy things going on right now. And it's on offense too. Like, obviously you look at the good stuff and you don't want to focus on the bad stuff because they're so incredible and they're so capable of putting up points at any time. But you have to focus on that stuff sometimes. And they're playing a little sloppy to start the year.
Yeah, I commented before about what the Ravens did to counteract the Chiefs to an extent. I mean, this is still a team, Steve, that put up 35 points. When you're putting up 35 points a game or in the 30s, it's not the offense's fault, even with the Clyde Edwards-Helaire fumble. But Wink Martindale only blitzed on 12.9% of the dropbacks. Like that is a complete shift. And then back to Lamar Jackson, it is, and I want to emphasize this, right? Not a lot of teams have a walk in the park with Lamar Jackson. And let's make sure we're clear with that. Like, we're not saying that this is an easy thing to do. It's way easier said than done. Hey, go stop Lamar Jackson, one of the most athletic people in the world, right? But they needed to be better. I mean, it was just all night in these gut check moments where in the bigger moments, I think, the opposing players are going to want to have the ball in their hands. And you just knew Lamar Jackson at times in this game was keeping it. And I think that was what was so frustrating too, because I think we've grown so accustomed to see Patrick Mahomes do this to people where, Mahomes is going to want the ball in his hands and he's going to go beat you. And you know that it's coming. And guess what? There's nothing you could do about it. That's what Lamar Jackson was doing in this game. You knew that he was going to keep the ball at times. There was even some flashiness to it too, where he flipped into the end zone. This is a team, as long as they're able to overcome their injuries, the Chiefs could see again in the playoffs. So you hope that they can get this figured out and they remember that moment in particular. Steve, before we go, because I do want to get to a break here, and then if you're listening again on our podcast channel, we will have the press conferences that the Chiefs have after the game. Any final points, any final thoughts about this night as we look toward next week?
They got a lot of things to figure out on defense, and they've got a tough schedule. There's no gimme games in the NFL. They've got a couple, moving forward. But yeah, next week it's the Chargers and it's Justin Herbert. And this team has got some issues right now. I still think they're the best team in football or second best team in football, but you can't give up 250 yards on the ground. They got a lot of things that they need to figure out on defense. And I still think that they've got some growing pains on offense that they're working through. But again, when they put up 35 points, it's hard to complain about any of that.
Yeah, I think, and I think we have to end here. This is not going to be a fun thing to say, but we got very excited this year with Patrick Mahomes at his golf outing, said the goal was 20-0. That is no longer possible. So that is now a storyline that you could put to rest. I don't mind that from Patrick Mahomes. I actually love that. I think in the media and even as fans of this team, you're always wanting them to just be candid and to say what's on their mind. And for him to have those lofty goals, I think is great. And I think it's important. I think it's great for the team to get behind them. I think there is with winning, and I'll mention this again and sort of go back to my first point. When you're winning each and every week, I think sometimes it's natural to forget about some of the problems you may have. So like, whereas I think 20-0 would have been great. One of the best moments I thought of the 2019 championship run was that gut check in Tennessee. The last time they lost on the road in a regular season game. And then they had to get together and they said, we're either going to be one team or we're going to be another team. MVP Pinnell came on board. The run defense looked good the rest of the way, and they rode that effort combined with the offense to a Super Bowl championship. I thought that the Raiders loss last year was key in saying, look, you're not this superhuman team that is going to be able to make a ton of mistakes and just go out and beat whoever because you have Patrick Mahomes. You can lose. It's a nice reminder that you could lose. And again, this is way earlier than you would have wanted the Chiefs to ever have a loss. But Tyrann Mathieu already said it, as I was saying before, where sometimes it's good to get your ass whooped, and that was exactly what happened tonight. The defense got their ass whooped. We can complain about the offense, and we can complain about Mecole Hardman and like I said, the Clyde fumble. But this was not the offense's fault. When you're able to put 35 points on the board, and you take the Mathieu interception for 6 away if you want. So let's say 28, even 28, you should be able to get the victory. So 20-0 won't happen. And so now it's okay. How can we go 19-1 then? Because I think you can turn inward and say, this is what we need to do to be a better football team. And it's going to have to start next week against an LA Chargers team that is also going to be looking to get their first win. They got a good offense, first win for Herbert against Mahomes. They got a good offense, and they are gunning for the division as well. Win or lose, we still Arrowhead Pride. That's a motto I just made up, Steve. So that means we will be right back to it tomorrow, right here on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network with an Arrowhead Drive, our first ever Arrowhead Drive, coming off a losing effort because we started it in the summer and they won all their preseason games. So we'll see how that changes the tone a little bit. We'll continue on with Out of Structure. Right now, as we speak, if you're listening on the live stream, you can submit your questions to Ron Kopp and Matt Stagner. Anything you want to discuss when it comes to this team, they will break down on the Out of Structure podcast. We've got the Editor's Show. We've got the Great British Chiefs Show. We'll do an interview series this week. We got Show and BK, Arrowhead Drive, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. As I always say, if you're listening on the podcast network, please rate and review us. We appreciate it. Sunday Night Football did not end how we were all hoping for, with the Baltimore Ravens defeating the Kansas City Chiefs 36-35. For Stephen Serda, I'm Pete Sweeney. Thank you for joining us on the Arrowhead Pride Rapid Recap Show.